I would never in a million years thought she would do this to my baby.
It was only 3. She barely said a couple words. She didn't bother nobody. It's the thought that she suffered. I can't get that out of my mind. She suffered.
There's a twist before the sentence is handed down. Harris decides she doesn't want to come to court because our cameras were rolling. She said it was for her safety, something Judge Kelly Ramsey said was disingenuous because her mugshot is already everywhere.
This has been a press case before, so her face is known.
Henderson only coming in if we blur her face, Fox 2 agreeing only to protect the family from a delay in the hearing.
I hate you so much. You did me bold, bro.
Paris, England did not wait for an ambulance. On Sunday, March 17, 2024, she snatched her 3-year-old daughter, Harmoni, off the bed where she lay unresponsive and ran out the front door. She drove frantically to the hospital, carried the limp toddler into the emergency room, and begged the medical staff to save her. But it was already too late. Harmoni Henderson was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. In those chaotic first moments, the explanation seemed simple, if tragic. The woman watching Harmoni, Paris's best friend and the child's godmother, Iesha Harris, claimed the toddler had fallen down the stairs. She said Harmoni bumped her head but seemed fine, so she tucked her into bed to rest. But the moment the doctors examined the child, that story collapsed. A fall down a flight of stairs causes bruises, maybe a fracture. It does not cause the skin to peel away from the body. It does not cause severe, full-thickness thermal burns. Harmoni's body told a different story, one of excruciating pain and intentional torture. The injuries were so severe that the explanation offered by the babysitter was not just a lie, it was a physical impossibility. This was not an accident. This was a crime scene. The person responsible was not a stranger lurking in a park or an intruder breaking through a window. The danger was sitting inside the house the whole time. Iesha Harris was the woman Paris trusted wholeheartedly. She was the other mother. She was the one person in the world Paris believed would protect her non-verbal autistic daughter with her life. Instead, she became her executioner. A mother's intuition told her the story was a lie. The autopsy proved it was a nightmare. If you are the kind of person who questions the official narrative and wants to understand the why behind the crime, you are in the right place. Join our investigation unit by hitting that subscribe button now. Let's open the file. Harmoni Henderson was 3 years old. At that age, most children are beginning to assert their independence, exploring the world with a mix of curiosity and caution. But Harmoni navigated the world differently. She was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder and was nonverbal. She could not articulate her needs, her hunger, or her pain in spoken words. She relied entirely on the adults around her to interpret her world and ensure her safety. Despite these challenges, her family describes a child who was vibrant and affectionate. Her mother, Paris, England, recalled that Harmoni had the biggest smile you will ever see. She was a source of joy, a child who lit up every room she entered. But raising a non-verbal child requires a level of vigilance that goes beyond standard parenting. It requires constant attention. It is physically and emotionally demanding. No parent can do it entirely alone. They need support. They need a village. Paris, England was a fierce advocate for her daughter. She did not leave Harmoni with strangers. She knew that her daughter could not speak up for herself, which meant the person watching her had to be beyond reproach. This was not about finding a babysitter on an app or hiring a neighbor's teenager. This was about family. Enter Iesha Marie Harris. At 30 years old, Harris was not an acquaintance. She was identified as Paris's best friend and a lifelong friend. In many communities, a bond this deep transcends friendship. It becomes kinship. Harris was considered Harmoni's godmother. She held a place of honor and authority in the family structure. Paris stated later that she trusted Harris wholeheartedly with her child. This trust was reinforced by the fact that Harris was a mother herself. On the day of the incident, Harris had her own infant present in the home. The assumption is automatic. A woman who is currently caring for her own baby possesses the maternal instinct to protect another child. You assume that the biological drive to nurture will extend to the child of your best friend. Paris believed she was leaving her daughter in the safest place possible, a home filled with love, history, and maternal experience. This brings us to a difficult question, one that hits close to home for everyone watching. Who is in your inner circle? Who has the spare key to your house? Who is the one person you would call if you had an emergency at 3 a.m.? We all have that short list of people we trust implicitly. We believe that because we have known them for years, we know their character. We assume that our history with them guarantees our safety. Paris, England operated on that same assumption. She believed her village was secure. She believed that her best friend was a protector. She had no reason to suspect that the person she trusted most was the single greatest threat to her daughter's life. On that Sunday afternoon, the arrangement began just like any other child care favor. Paris dropped Harmoni off at the residence on the Ews 15700 block of Southfield Freeway. There were no warning signs, no arguments, just a mother leaving her child in the hands of a friend, expecting to pick her up later that evening. Once the door closed and Paris drove away, the dynamic inside the house changed instantly. Iesha Harris was now the sole adult responsible for 2 lives, her own infant and 3-year-old Harmoni. This is where the duty of care should have been at its absolute highest. A non-verbal autistic child and a baby require constant, eyes-on supervision. They have no sense of danger. They cannot feed themselves, navigate hazards, or communicate if they are in distress. They are entirely dependent on the adult in the room. But Harris did not stay in the room with them. According to the findings of the Detroit police investigation, she made a conscious choice to disengage. She took the 2 children, put them into a bedroom, and isolated them. She did not just step out to use the restroom or grab a glass of water. She stayed away for approximately 3 hours. 3 hours. Think about that time frame. For an adult, 3 hours might pass quickly. It is a movie, a long nap, or a drive across town. For a toddler, 3 hours is an eternity. It is enough time to get hungry, thirsty, scared, or hurt. Left alone in that bedroom, Harmoni had no way to call for help. She could not open the door and ask where her auntie was. She could not verbalize her confusion. She was effectively trapped. While the children were isolated in that room, Harris was elsewhere in the house, smoking marijuana. The issue here is not a debate about the recreational use of cannabis in a general sense. The issue is impairment during sole charge caregiving. When you are the only line of defense for a special needs child, your senses need to be sharp. You need to be able to hear a muffled cry, smell smoke, or notice a sudden, heavy silence. By choosing to engage in substance use while the children were locked away, Harris prioritized her own recreation over their basic safety. She effectively clocked out. This period of 3 hours established the baseline for the tragedy. It was not a momentary lapse, it was a sustained abandonment. She separated herself physically and mentally from the children. They were out of sight, and for Harris, they were out of mind. The environment shifted from a safe haven to a zone of neglect. This level of negligence is infuriating because it is entirely preventable. It takes effort to ignore a child for that long. It is a deliberate act of selfishness. We often talk about accidents happening in a split second, but this was a slow-motion failure. She had 3 hours to check on them. 3 hours to be a responsible adult. She chose not to. Like this video if you believe supervision is the bare minimum when watching a child. By the time Harris finally decided to return to that bedroom, the damage to her judgment was already done. She was entering that room not as a patient, caregiver ready to help, but as an impaired adult returning to a responsibility she had been avoiding all afternoon. She was relaxed, disconnected, and unprepared for reality. And what she found inside that room would not be met with compassion, but with a reaction so disproportionate and violent that it defies comprehension. When Harris finally re-entered the bedroom after her 3-hour absence, she was met with a situation that any parent or caregiver understands. Harmoni had vomited on herself and her surroundings. For a non-verbal child, this is a distress signal. It indicates illness, anxiety, or simply a dietary rejection. It is a moment of vulnerability that demands comfort, a bath, and fresh clothes. But Harris was not in a state to offer comfort. She was high, disengaged, and likely annoyed that her relaxation was interrupted by a mess. The sight of the vomit did not trigger compassion. It triggered a catastrophic loss of control. Investigators later described her reaction as becoming enraged. The shift was instant. The caregiver vanished, replaced by an aggressor. The violence that followed was not a single, reflexive slap. It was a sequence of torture. Harris took the 3-year-old to the bathroom. She turned on the water. She did not test it to see if it was safe. She let it run until it was scalding. Then she poured it over the child. The distinction here is critical. She did not accidentally dip the child in a bath that was too hot. She poured it. This is an active, targeted motion. Scalding water at high temperatures causes immediate third-degree burns. It destroys the skin layer by layer, damaging nerves and tissue instantly. Harmoni would have been in agonizing pain, but because she was nonverbal, her ability to scream or communicate that pain may have been different from other children, or perhaps her screams were simply ignored. The assault did not end with the burns. In her rage, Harris slammed Harmoni's head against the side of the bathtub. Bathtubs are rigid structures, cast iron or steel coated in enamel. They are unforgiving. The force required to cause a fatal injury against such a surface is massive. This was not a slip. It was a high-velocity impact that caused severe blunt force trauma. At this moment, the room fell silent. The rage subsided, and the reality of the injuries became undeniable. Harmoni was burned and suffering from a catastrophic brain injury. This is where the crime shifts from a moment of passion to cold-blooded self-preservation. A rational person, even one who has made a terrible mistake, calls 911 immediately. They scream for help. They try to cool the burns. They try to save the life. Harris did none of those things. She took the dying child, carried her out of the bathroom, and put her into a bed. She covered her with a sheet. She tucked her in. It was a macabre pantomime of caregiving. She tried to hide the damage she had done by treating the victim as if she were simply sleeping. Let's pause and look at the medical reality of those next few hours. When the head strikes a hard object, the brain can swell. If the skull is intact, that swelling has nowhere to go. It compresses the brainstem, the part of the body that controls breathing and heart rate. This is called herniation. It does not happen instantly. It is a slow, suffocating process. There is a concept in trauma medicine called the golden hour. If a patient gets to a surgeon within that first hour to relieve the pressure, they have a fighting chance. Survival is possible, but every minute that ticks by reduces that chance to 0. Harmoni lay in that bed for hours. While her brain swelled and her body went into shock from the burns, the one person who could have made the call sat in the other room. Harris didn't just hurt her. She stole the only chance she had to survive. She traded the child's life for a few more hours of freedom. By the time Paris, England, called to check on her daughter, the plan was already set. Harris lied effortlessly. She told Paris that Harmoni had fallen down the stairs and bumped her head, but was fine. It was a calculated lie designed to keep the mother away. She knew if Paris saw the child, the police would be called instantly. So she bought time, hoping perhaps the child would wake up, or perhaps simply delaying the inevitable discovery of what she had done. The deception collapsed the moment Paris, England walked through the door. While Harris had managed to delay the inevitable over the phone, the physical reality of Harmoni's condition was impossible to hide in person. Paris did not need a medical degree to know that her daughter had not merely bumped her head. The child was unresponsive. Her skin was severely damaged. The stairs narrative evaporated instantly in the face of the visual evidence. When Paris rushed Harmoni to the hospital, the medical staff immediately recognized the signs of non-accidental trauma. Doctors and nurses are mandatory reporters for a reason. They know the difference between a tumble and torture. A fall down a flight of stairs creates a specific pattern of injury. Impact bruises, perhaps a broken bone, or scrapes. It does not create full-thickness thermal burns. It does not cause the skin to slough off in a pattern consistent with poured liquid. The Detroit Police Department took over the investigation, led by the Special Victims Unit. From the outset, the investigators treated the stairs explanation with skepticism. The physics simply did not add up. In criminal investigations, this is often where a suspect's story breaks down, not because they get the words wrong, but because they cannot argue with the laws of nature. Harris was brought in for questioning. Initially, she held to her story. She maintained that it was an accident, a tragic fall that she had tried to manage on her own. But the detectives pressed her. The discrepancy between a fall and scalding. Water is too vast to explain away. To bridge that gap, investigators utilized a polygraph examination. While polygraph results are generally inadmissible in court proceedings, they are highly effective tools in the interrogation room. They apply psychological pressure. They signal to the suspect that their baseline deception is being registered. Harris failed the polygraph. Confronted with the failure and the relentless logic of the forensic evidence, her defense fractured. She abandoned the stairs lie and admitted to the truth. She confessed to the marijuana use. She confessed to the rage. She admitted that the water was not an accident. She had poured it. She admitted that the head injury was not a fall. She had slammed the child against the tub. This confession aligned perfectly with the medical examiner's findings. The concept of res ipsa loquitur, the thing speaks for itself, is powerful here. The burns on Harmoni's body were a roadmap of the assault. The pattern of the scalds indicated that liquid was poured from above or directed at specific areas. This requires manual dexterity and intent. You have to turn the faucet, test the heat, or ignore it, fill a container, and tip it over the victim. It is a sequence of conscious choices, not a momentary reflex. The stairs excuse was revealed to be a desperate, illogical cover for a brutal homicide. It was a lie born of self-preservation, constructed by a woman who had just killed her best friend's child and was trying to talk her way out of a murder charge. Do you think the stairs excuse was panic or calculated malice? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. The legal system often feels disconnected from the raw emotion of a crime, reducing tragedy to statutes and sentencing guidelines. For Iesha Harris, the initial charges were absolute. The Wayne County Prosecutor's Office charged her with felony murder and first-degree child abuse. In Michigan, a conviction for felony murder carries a mandatory sentence of life without the possibility of parole. It is the end of the line. Harris remained in the Wayne County Jail for over a year, denied bond because the judge deemed her a danger to children. As the trial date approached in May 2025, the defense and prosecution reached a resolution that avoided a jury verdict. On May 13, 2025, just weeks before the trial was set to begin, Iesha Harris pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. In exchange for this plea, the felony murder and child abuse charges were dismissed. For those outside the courtroom, this might feel like a compromise of justice. Why drop the most severe charge? The answer often lies in the desire to protect the survivors. A trial forces the family to relive the worst day of their lives. It forces a mother to sit in a courtroom and look at autopsy photos of her tortured child. It forces her to listen to the defense attorney argue that perhaps the scalding water wasn't that hot, or the slam wasn't that hard. By accepting the plea, the prosecution secured a guaranteed murder conviction and spared Paris, England from further trauma. However, the consequences for Harris remain severe. Second-degree murder in Michigan is punishable by life or any term of years. This gives the sentencing judge wide discretion. Given the brutality of the crime, the torture of a disabled child by her own godmother, it is anticipated that the sentence will be at the very top of the guidelines. Harris effectively traded a mandatory life sentence for a likely life sentence, with only a slim, distant hope of parole in old age. This case closes with a lesson that is hard to swallow. We are taught to fear strangers. We teach our children not to talk to people they don't know. But Harmoni Henderson was not killed by a stranger. She was killed by a woman who had likely held her, fed her, and played with her 100 times before. The village failed because we assumed that emotional closeness equals safety. We assumed that because someone is a best friend, they are automatically a safe caregiver. This tragedy forces us to reevaluate that standard. Vetting the people who watch our children must go deeper than friendship. It requires us to look at their ability to handle stress, their substance use, and their temperament when the doors are closed. We cannot rely on history alone. We must verify their capability in the present. Harmoni could not speak to tell us she was in danger. Now, her story speaks for her. If you believe that justice for children like Harmoni requires us to be more vigilant about who we trust, join us as we continue to expose these cases. Click the subscribe button and turn on notifications. The next file is already on my desk and it exposes a system failure that you won't believe. Click the video on your screen now to watch it.